this is Robert Estrin at livingpianos.com. Today's question is, what is the most difficult scale to play on the piano? And we're going to restrict ourselves just to major scales. And I promise you're going to get an answer by the end of this video that may surprise you. If you're just starting on the piano, it can seem a bit intimidating when you have scales with a lot of sharps, for example. Just being able to figure out the notes is tough, like a B major scale, for example, with 5 sharps. So you figure, how do you negotiate a thing like that? Well, actually, there is something in a B major scale that makes it easier than you might think. It's something referred to as mirror fingering. What is mirror fingering? Mirror fingering is when you're playing your thumb at the same note in both hands. In this case, B and E, the thumbs play, and all the other notes are played with fingers, are black keys. That kind of breaks it down for you. So the E is thumbs in both hands. And once again, the B is thumbs in both hands. And you use fingers for the other notes on the black keys. So actually, B major isn't as hard as you might think. Although, just reading it, if you're a relative beginner, can be daunting. And the other nice thing about B major is the thumbs play just a half step above the preceding black key. You go from D sharp to E, just a half step away, and A sharp to B. So it's relatively easy to do that. Well, let's take an intimidating flat scale like G flat. G flat major, it sounds like this. Now here again you have mirror fingering. There is one slight difference in that the first time the thumbs both play white keys is on C flat, which is a white key in this case. The next time it plays is on F. Now why is that significant? Because the first time the thumbs play, it's a half step above the B flat to C flat. The next time it plays a white key, it's a whole step. So the thumbs have to remember which time they play just a half step above the preceding black key, and which time they play a whole step above the preceding black key. A little bit more complicated, but at least you can anchor your thumbs on the white keys and the fingers play the black keys. Now let's go to another scale that you would think would be easier, and in fact, generally people learn their scales in order of the circle of fifths, starting with scales that have fewer sharps and flats and going to scales with more sharps and flats. But D major I'm going to pick now because D major does not have mirror fingering. That is to say, you do not have the thumbs on white keys and fingers on black keys. There aren't enough black keys to accomplish that. But more than that, the thumbs do play together on D, but then the right hand thumb plays G, the left hand thumb plays A. So you do not have that benefit of anchoring the thumbs on the same note in both hands. It actually makes it a little bit more difficult to play, even if it is a bit easier to learn. So once again, you go and the thumb in the right hand is on G, where you have a second finger in the left hand. But then you do land on thumbs in both hands on D, which helps. So now, what is the most difficult scale? Believe it or not, once you learn your scales, they're all about the same difficulty, but there's one that is just a little bit harder than the rest, and that's C major. How could this be? It's the first scale everybody learns. You figure it's easy because it's all white keys. Well, that's exactly why it's the hardest scale to play, because you don't have the benefit of anchoring on black keys. It's just a whole sea of white keys that are not differentiated from one another. And you certainly don't have the benefit either of mirror fingering, because your thumbs, while they both play C, the thumbs come on different notes in the middle of the scale. So C major. The C major scale takes more concentration for an accomplished pianist, because once you learn all your scales, as I said, they're all about the same, but you don't have the benefit of the black keys to guide you. More than that, like D major, you don't have the anchoring of the mirror fingering you do on C. But once you get to F, you've got the thumb in the right hand and the second finger in the left hand, and then G, you got the thumb in the left hand and the second finger in the right hand. So you have the difficulties of D major and other scales that don't have mirror fingering, plus you don't have any black keys to guide you at all. I bet some of you are surprised to learn that the C major is the hardest scale to play, but it's a fact. And that is in regards to major scales. Minor scales are a whole other lesson. And incidentally, if you need fingering for major scales, minor scales, and all your major and minor arpeggios, Hanon 60 Selected Studies for the Virtuoso Pianist is kind of the scale and arpeggio Bible for pianists. It's what the vast majority of pianists use as a reference for fingering of all major and minor scales and arpeggios. Now, there is another school of thought where all the scales are played with mirror fingering. This is not standard, but I understand the logic of it. Love to hear from any of you out there who utilize mirror fingering in all your scales. I've never learned them that way. I just kind of like you learn how to type on a keyboard that is not the most ergonomic, but with the letters placed in a kind of random order instead of the ones you use most in the middle, which would be better, but imagine relearning that. It's the same thing with scales. I know my scales and arpeggios. I learned them as a young child, and they're with me for the rest of my life, and I'm not changing now. Thanks so much for joining me. I hope this has been enjoyable for you. Once again, this is Robert Estrin at livingpianos.com.